Just a couple of guys, a couple of microphones, and a heck of a lot of know. It's Football on the Know with Jim and Joe.
What they say, it's not the X's and the O's, it's the Jimmies and the Joes.
Alrighty, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Football on the Know. I am Jim McPhee. Alongside of me is Mr. Joe DeCapita.
Welcome, Know-It-Alls. Welcome back for another edition of Football on the Know Show. We are ready to go, locked and loaded for yet another edition of this week's Division Reviews.
Yeah.
And if you're new to the show, I got something else to tell you guys. Could you please do us a huge favor? Help us grow in YouTube. Help us get through this algorithm. Let us get noticed here. Head over to YouTube. Hit that subscribe button for us. And also, while you're there, hit that notification bell to let you guys know when we go live. And, of course, you can always as well follow us on Facebook and anywhere. That's right. Anywhere you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, you name it, we're there. Drop a follow there as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. We're excited to talk about the reviews. You know, season's coming. We got the last week of preseason games coming up here, so we're going to see some of the starters take the field. You would see a little more often here, and some people even are wondering if their teams are even going to put some of their starters in here just because they're afraid of injuries, because this is sometimes what you see in preseason and why they've limited the amount of games that they've had in the preseason due to some of these injuries and stuff like that, and your starters being in there. And it's just limited the amount of exposure, though, with some of these younger guys that you get out there. Some people trying to make the team, though. So I think it makes cuts a little difficult for some of these teams as well, for guys that are trying to make the active roster. But it's an exciting time, and the season's upon us, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, if you notice, that's the whole reason why they cut back. They used to have 4 preseason games. They cut down to 3 because, according to the coaches in the front office, they don't need 4 games to evaluate those younger players or the players that are at least trying to make the roster, that are maybe on the bubble. So they've all come to an agreement, and that's why we have only 3 preseason games to go. You don't see the starters. You're right. You don't see them a lot because they don't need to be out there a lot, but they still need to get reps. They still need to get live reps on the football field because you can't camouflage that part of your game. You got to play at the, top speed of when week 1 rolls around, where everybody's ready to go. And if you haven't had enough reps as a starter, you look a little rusty out there. So for the teams going forward, last week upon us, this is where it's make or break for these younger guys, like maybe even a rookie that was drafted late. Last ditch effort to try to make the final 53.
Yep, absolutely. And we've been doing our reviews. So this week we've made it up to the AFC and NFC East. So, Joe, let's kick right into it. Let's go into the AFC and the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, the Bills. And here's one thing that I took away from looking at the roster was that I am just blown away. This is one of the few teams in this league that just has crazy amounts of depth. Like when we remember them a year ago with everyone knows Diggs, right? Stephon Diggs, the number 1 go-to receiver for them. And Gabe Davis started to make a name for himself for people that weren't familiar with the Bills roster last year. Really started to come on. And you're like, well, after that, what did they have? Well, yeah, they had Dawson Knox at tight end that kind of, would kind of break up the monotony of throwing it to Diggs all the time and Davis. But now you look at this team, this offense. Wow. Like, I mean, the depth at receiver alone. And granted, they're not a lot of big names, but they have some players that can really ball out. Khalil Shakir, he can play very well. Very good receiver, not a big name, but you might even get to know him a little bit more this year. Trent Sherfield came over from Miami, which is an interesting ad. A division rival, you see this happen a lot, where they'll add talent from an opponent's roster if they're available. And then you go a little bit, farther down, and there's a couple names that you might know. Andy Isabella, former of the Cardinals, a guy that's still young, still in his prime, but just hasn't been given a true shot. Maybe he can break the lineup with the Buffalo Bills. And Kiki Cutie.
Yeah.
Interesting. A guy that had a phenomenal 1 year with the Texans, went to the Niners, and now is with the Bills. And the interesting thing is, oh no, my fault. I'm sorry. I'm thinking ahead to the Dolphins roster. My bad.
Yep.
But not to mention, all I'm saying is like the roster is very deep. You look at the receivers, like I said, offensive line. They took the best lineman by a lot of people. A lot of people consider him the best coming out in this draft in Cyrus Torrance. Crazy athlete, crazy big, strong guy. So he's going to help fill that void in at the offensive guard spot. And then they also drafted in the first round Dalton Kincaid, the premier receiving threat at tight end in college. He's teaming up with Dawson Knox. Now that you just add more depth at that position too. You already know about James Cook. You already know about, Damian Harris coming over from the Patriots.
Right. Yeah.
That's another big addition. And then, overall, like this offense alone, we haven't even got to the defense yet, but the offense looks pretty solid.
Yeah, they're trying to stay on point with what they were before last year. Again, number 2 ranked offense in the league. Josh Allen, again, really coming into his own again as being a star out there with this league. And they wanted to help keep him upright too. Again, drafting, guard, trying to keep him there and trying to tell him this season, maybe slide a little more, not get crazy with you. We need to keep you healthy. I know you've got that big body and stuff like that too, but we've seen that with other guys with bigger bodies that even tried to be a little more elusive, break down eventually too in your older years too. So they want to keep him fresh, want to keep him there with the team, and he is the whole face of this team because, again, we looked at it in the depth chart as well. What do you have behind him? You have Kyle Allen and then Matt Barkley. So if he goes down, you're going to be struggling a little bit, even though you've got some decent weapons here. But that would hurt you,
Well,
and they
yeah,
do lose
of course.
and Isaiah McKenzie too, so he's no longer there for them. But again, I like the matchup here and getting another receiving tight end here too to match up with a Dawson Knox. He is a little banged up right now too, but I think he still will be good to go at the beginning of the season. But it'll be a nice matchup and get that offense going to where they've just fallen up short, Joe. In this last 4 seasons, they've lost twice in the divisional round. They've lost in the wild card round, and then they lost in the conference championship. So this team has been the team there to kind of beat that has been picked number 1 to go to the Super Bowl and possibly win here. They just have that edge. They just need to get over that hump, but they've faced some of those other tougher teams here, like the Cincinnati Bengals, who have been their heel here, and then in the Kansas City Chiefs. So trying to get this offense going, keep it going. And like you were saying, we haven't got to the defense yet, but again, no longer Leslie Frazier there at the defensive spot. Now you've got Sean McDermott, the man himself, who said he likes getting in there in the weeds here with everybody and actually being able to be that coach there with everybody, again, on that defensive side. And let's see what kind of animal they pull out this year.
Yeah, and just to hop over on the defense real quick, like, again, depth is the mantra for the Buffalo Bills this year because we all knew that they had, they bring in Daquan Jones, the D tackle that they're going to put right up next to Ed Oliver to kind of wreak havoc up the middle. Gregory Rousseau coming into his own at the edge position. They also bring in a free agent addition in Leonard Floyd, which is interesting because maybe he could be that kind of like rotational pass rushing specialist for them, along with Von Miller, who has been there last year, looking to return again, and after he comes back from healthy, after he comes back from injury, of course. And then Jordan Phillips, a D tackle, come back over from Arizona. A nice rotational D tackle presence there, can stop the run, can do it all. Then you look into the linebacking core. Now this is kind of. You saw them kind of attack it a little bit in the draft with Dorian Williams, who I am super excited about. I think this kid, despite his size, I think he's going to be a difference maker for this team going forward. Great tackler, can cover like no other coming out of college. But you still got Matt Milano. You got Terrell Bernard, both solid options there. And then get to the secondary. You got the returning vets at safety, Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. You got Tre'Davious White coming back, looks to be fully healthy. Let's see if he can stay that way. Christian Benford last year played more of a predominant role. Now he's looking to go more to a rotational position, but still. And then they brought in, a year ago, Khairi Elam, the rookie corner that they drafted. He's still coming into his own. So overall, and then I got to mention him too. Congratulations, DeMar Hamlin. He's back again.
Absolutely.
Healthy.
Right?
He looked really good in preseason, was tackling well. You didn't see any hesitation from him because that's usually what athletes do coming back from a major injury or any kind of catastrophic event like he went through. You tend to maybe hesitate. You tend to not maybe go all the way in, and this guy had no fear at all. Still plays the game hard, still comes up and will hit you right in your chest. And Taylor Rapp, I feel like, was another addition to this defense to add some depth behind that safety position.
We got Tom Leiter in the house with us tonight.
What's going on, Tom?
He says Buffalo owns the AFC East, so
we will see.
We shall see, and now we got Aaron Rodgers coming into town and the Jets,
Right.
and a lot of the Jets fans, at least around here in New York, they're excited
They're hyped.
and they're hyped about this whole thing. And again, they're
They
one
are
of those
hyped.
teams that I was talking about, to where Aaron Rodgers, that's nice and all, they got him here, but then some of these Jets fans don't want him to play in this last preseason game just to make sure that he is not banged around, because in the Snoopy Bowl, too, we've seen a lot of different New York Giants players and Jets players get injured, too, last minute in the last game, too. Don't want to spoil your season before it gets started,
That's right.
especially when you've got Aaron Rodgers here on a loaner program basically right now, too. So in order to get where you need to go, you need him for these next 2 years, because then your franchise is either going to restart, or what I've noticed even with him, that he's been mentoring Zach Wilson a little bit here, a little different from what we kind of saw of Aaron Rodgers before.
Right.
But yeah, we'll see. We'll see with the Bills. But again, we brought it up before. The last 4 seasons, they've been there and just haven't been able to get it done. But they're, there's other competitions that's building up in the AFC, so it's going to be tough for them to show out here. So. All right, let's move on next to now the Miami Dolphins here. Miami Dolphins, Joe got into them a little bit here, with them adding Kiti Kuti and
Accidentally.
stuff like that. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, talk about weapons too. Again, in offensive weapons, they looked really good. And Mike McDaniels, he ended up getting them to the wild card and just losing to the Bills only by 3 points here too. So that was a tough game, a game of turnovers and mistakes here, but. Nonetheless, Tua looked really good. His best season, I think, so far. It's 25 touchdowns and 8 interceptions for 105 QBR. So, I mean, looking really good for the season. This year, too, going and trying that, was it Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he's gaining some more weight here to stay healthy and not get injured as much.
Yeah,
here,
the whole reason for the jiu-jitsu part of it is that he's trying to learn how to fall correctly. Because there's certain ways to fall. They call it correctly, but certain ways to fall where you don't take all the blunt force on like one part of your body or whatever. You know what I mean? So there's a way to fall. He's learning that. Hopefully it works out better for him this year and he's able to avoid any kind of concussion, because that was the major concern coming into this season is he going to play? Is he going to call it quits? Is he going to be able to play in terms of what the doctors say? And he's been cleared. His family, the front office got together and they've discussed it, and they're deciding to move forward. So he is going to continue to play. So good for him.
We've got Demir Nader in the house with us tonight.
What's going on, Demir? Welcome to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, chime in. We're talking AFC East, NFC East this week, and we're on the Dolphins.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Tua gained 10 more pounds, too. I mean, and I know he's getting slack from, was it Ryan Clark, I think's out there talking trash or something, and then now he's got something to say about it, too. And
right.
that's a funny topic, too. We always thought was funny in between the media saying things and then players getting reacted to it and everything.
Right.
It's all trying to drum up stuff here, but
for sure.
One thing I think that has been on the conversation for this team, though, too, is the amount of running backs that they've had in the backfield, but not really, summing out to really anything back there. Last year,
feature
even
back?
Yes, and rushing attempts even last year they were 31st. And so with those guys that they've had there here, not really get a whole lot, kind of middle of the barrel too in yardage, to where they've even been brought up in conversation to where a lot of people think that they should maybe be in that sweepstakes for the Jonathan Taylor trade.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be completely honest. Like, the Dolphins, they seem to be comfortable, and you look at the way they run their offense, right, with Mike McDaniel, and he likes to use multiple backs in the backfield. He's not a real big advocate of having that featured back, having only one type of running back in the backfield to do everything. So that's why you see how they constructed this offense, and you look at who they have there with Raheem Mostert, who has battled injuries, but when he's healthy, he looks amazing on the football field. Jeff Wilson Jr., also another guy that can do a lot of things extremely well. And then they drafted a rookie this year, Devon Kane, who we had in our draft special as one of those running backs to watch out for this year, especially even fantasy owners out there. If you're looking for a sleeper to kind of grab on later in the rounds, this is a rookie that you might want to keep your eyes on. And he could even carve out a big-time role in this offense that utilizes all of them. Because every running back is not the same. Some guys catch better. Some guys run better routes. Some guys can block better and what have you, or run between the tackles. So that's what Mike likes to do. He likes to mix things up. He doesn't keep anything, old-fashioned, like we're just going to strictly do this formation. We're going to strictly use this player in this spot. We're not going to change too much. He likes to get creative. He likes to move pieces around. You saw Tyreek Hill being that chess piece last year, moving him in all different types of receiving positions, and the same thing with Jalen Waddle. And it created problems for defenses. So look for much of the same thing to happen offensively.
Yeah, absolutely. And the key for them, again, this year going forward is for Tua to stay healthy. And because you saw what happened when he was out there, too. I mean, he was answering a lot of questions that people had about him. And with the weapons out there, you give the guys some weapons. Both Waddle and Tyreek Hill were lighting it up and getting it done here, too. So they didn't need the running game as much here to get further. But one thing they did a little bit need was some help in the backfield here on that defense, and they go out and they get Jalen Ramsey, who is actually starting to trend downwards a little bit here too, but they go out and get that veteran over there, and obviously he signs with them to try and see that they're obviously trending forward too as well, knows to get out of the Los Angeles Rams situation, and they're trying to secure up their secondary too as well for their team.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And here's the other problem is like Jalen Ramsey's hurt. Like he's not even healthy yet. He's not even able to show what he can do with this defense going forward. And you look at what the positions that they've been able to obtain, like even in free agency. David Long Jr., I think, is a tremendous signing for them because they were in much need of that position at linebacker to kind of bring in someone that could start right away, and they found that in David Long Jr., a guy that can do everything extremely well. Bradley Chubb was there a year ago via trade from the Broncos. I think he was okay. Like last year, like he was decent for the Dolphins, but I don't think he was as big of an impact as what they were hoping he could be. Obviously, you look at their secondary with Xavier Howard. We all know who he is. If Ramsey's able to get healthy, and you kind of team these vets up with some of these younger players that they have, in like a Javon Holland and Noah Igbinoghene. That's a troublesome name. But like, there's some of these younger pieces that they have. Brandon Jones at safety, like if they can work with them and give them like maybe little tips and tricks that they can implement into their game, that's going to make them even better of a secondary. We already know the Dolphins' defense last year was actually pretty solid. They were pretty good, and going into this year, like I feel like the one thing that they really need to hopefully it gets better for them is like Jalen Phillips, Christian Wilkins, and Raekwon Davis. Hopefully they can penetrate better. They can get more of a pass rush to kind of help out the secondary and the backers that way. But overall, their defense is solid. We already know how explosive their offense can be and looks like it's going to be again. And what did they do with that offense this year? They added more weapons on top of what they already have. They had Jalen Waddle. They had Tyreek Hill. You know those big names. But then you look at what they've been able to do in terms of depth. Like you see the Bills. Remember we talked about them and how deep they are? Well, the Dolphins seem like they're mimicking that this year. They brought in Braxton Berrios, a guy that some people know very well in the AFC East. Very elusive, quick, shifty type of receiver. He might carve out a really nice, niche here, maybe in the slot receiver like he's been used mostly. But the other interesting thing is they also bring in Robbie Chosen. Not Robbie Anderson. It's Robbie Chosen now. He changed his name. So he's going to come. Maybe he can kind of be that rotational player for them, and that's kind of what they're hoping for. Maybe he can make an impact. Cedric Wilson Jr. from the Cowboys, a guy that kind of really shined in Dallas and thought that he was going to definitely stay there. And here he was, became a free agent. They chose not to give him a raise or what have you, and he's here in Miami. So, and then of course, Kiki Cutie, like I mentioned earlier. Now I can talk about him. He's also there. Not saying he's going to make an impact at all. It looks like he's on the bubble of making this roster, but if you go back to his time with the Houston Texans, he definitely looked like a promising receiver. And there you have it. You look at the offensive line that they've managed to come back. A little bit of bad news for them going forward. Teron Armstead is a bit nicked up here. Looks like he's targeting for week 1 to come back and be ready for the opening game. Hopefully he does, because that is a huge loss if otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like you said, that offense, what they were able to do, the 2 wide receivers, Tyreek Hill, 1,700 yards, Waddle, 1,300 yards. There's only so much that can go around for everybody over there, but hell yeah. I mean, for an offense of Mike McCarthy or Mike McDaniels, too, who I thought he was going to run a little bit more, he ended up passing like going crazy here. So for a guy like Tom Leiter say, too, that this is the Bills, they own this division. Well, that was a tough game, and he only won by 3 points in that wild card game, and it was tight. Mike Tackett's in the house with us tonight. What's going on, Mike? Says bigger headline: USFL signing 40 guys to NFL rosters, or the XFL signing 60 guys to the NFL roster.
XFL. XFL signing 60 guys to the NFL roster.
There you go. Why not? And I think it's just because they had a little more on edge there too, because they are partnered with the NFL basically too, with the Rock and everything too. So they had a greater chance, or a better pool. But that's good to see though, and that's why those leagues are there, and that's why the NFL has jumped onto something like that to try and give these guys another shot, you know, and to showcase their talents elsewhere, and it only gives them more exposure, because if there were fans of those different leagues watching year round, all of a sudden those guys are on the NFL teams. They're watching the NFL to follow these guys too, if they happen to be a fan of these guys. So it only makes more football all the time and more stuff for the NFL and more intrigue. He says, you guys plan on watching the Netflix 4-part special on the 07 Florida Gators or the HBO special on Bishop Sycamore? Both are out now. One, Joe knows I don't have HBO because I'm really cheap too, so I'm not gonna watch any of that. So
hashtag know it all.
And then the Florida Gators, maybe I've been watching a little more of that type of stuff. You know, I'm not really a Netflix binger either, but I've been watching that quarterback show, and I was thinking about watching the Johnny Manziel thing too, because I know a friend of ours had said something about some of the things that he confesses in that show,
right?
And it brings up to the point with some of these guys that get in trouble with the NCAA, with things that they've done, and revoking wins, trophies, Heisman trophies, things like that, out of the record books, and he's openly admitting it on a docu-series and doesn't see any of that. And it's things that had happened during those seasons when he had won awards and stuff like that. So I'm wondering if this will stir up anything, and maybe backlash will happen and come back to him at one point for all this, because we saw it with like Reggie Bush and other guys.
Right.
But yeah, good questions by Mike Tackett. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mike.
Guys, keep up the comments as well down there. So, Joe, let's move on here. We are talking AFC East. Let's go to the New England Patriots here. What do we got to say here about the New England Patriots?
Well, I know there's like, as far as the NFL fans out there go, some people, like even Patriot fans, are like convinced that this Pats team this year is going to be competitive. They're going to make a run for the division. And then you have the other part of it where people are like, how? From based on what we saw last year, and I know it's very different year to year, but how from last year? Well, here's where I think the Patriot fans are looking at. Offensive coordinator is now Bill O'Brien, former offensive coordinator of the Patriots when they were successful as well. So that right there, I think tells a lot. And because they didn't have a true offensive coordinator calling the plays last year, that really kind of hindered that offense, and for them being able to put points on the board and kind of holding them back in a sense. You saw many times where Mac Jones was walking off the field screaming and berating what was the defensive-minded coach calling offensive plays, which was very interesting, to say the least. So, I mean, that right there was terrible. And it kind of brought question marks last year, like, what are they doing? Like, why aren't they hiring an offensive coordinator or calling someone up within the offensive ranks to call plays. Neither of which happened, and you saw the turmoil last year and how much they struggled on that side of the ball. Bringing Bill O'Brien back is a huge thing because he's already familiar with the playbook. He's familiar how to call the plays. He's had experience in the NFL, and that right there is going to really kind of boost the offensive side of the ball for them to put points on the board and hopefully sustain drives going forward.
We got Mike Tackett.
Mike Tackett again.
He's going to hook us up.
We also got Franklin Adams.
Yeah, Franklin Adams.
Franklin Adams said Corey Davis just retired. Who should the Jets go after, especially since Rodgers took a pay cut? I will say this. Corey Davis retired. Congratulations, Corey Davis. But as far as the Jets adding receivers, I don't think they need more receivers.
I was going to say the same thing.
They are pretty set at where they're at. And we're about to get to the Jets in a moment, but where we'll kind of break it down more. But I would just say this. Corey Davis wasn't even in the starting lineup or the conversation.
He saw the writing on the wall.
So here's the deal. And this is the crazier thing to me is I almost wonder if New York asked him to, what do you want to do? Because they were on the hook. And they have to pay his remaining guaranteed money, of course.
Yes.
But this year he was going to make, I think, like $11 million or something like that in his final year of his deal. And I know they didn't want to pay it. You know, they're already looking for ways to kind of reduce that number. But so I think they went to Corey Davis and said, hey, listen, you know, we're just going to be honest with you. You're really not going to see the field unless injury happens. And you're not in our future plans anyway. What do you do you even want to remain on the team, or do you want to like maybe resign or retire or whatever? And I think they had that conversation with them. Obviously, we don't know for sure, but I think that was kind of the conversation had. And Corey Davis like, all right, you know what? I've had a long career. I've had some success in this league. I think it's time to hang him up.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that one. Like you said, we'll get to it in a little bit here. But the Patriots, again, like you brought up the fact that now they do have a real offensive coordinator here.
Imagine that.
Bill O'Brien. And you see the difference now with Mac Jones over in the preseason at least. For sure. You know, and I think it's going to work out better for him. And he's really connecting with some of these wide receivers, even the guys that have been here. But then you saw that they brought in a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster here with them. And now Zeke Elliott, again, jumped onto this team here to move on with. Now that looks like a nice piece. Like we talked about the decline of Ezekiel Elliott here and things like that there with Tony Pollard.
Right.
But now if you pair him with like Ramondre Stevenson, I like the 1-2 punch there. And even, you know, when they got a chance to run the football here.
Yeah, can we just like extinguish the whole story that's kind of being spun? Ever since Zeke got signed, everyone's like, "Oh, we expect Zeke to start now."
Oh,
no,
I didn't even hear.
No, not at all. Oh yeah, people were going crazy. Absolutely, everybody. As soon as he got signed,
Stevenson had like over 1,000 yards.
It's almost like they forgot Stevenson is a good running back.
Yeah,
they kind of ran with the story, and everyone was like saying, "Oh, well, Zeke projects like he could be the starter now that he signed with New England." No. Ramondre Stevenson is a better back right now than Elliott is.
Yes.
And Zeke, what he's going to be doing for the Patriots, most likely he's going to be that goal line back. He's going to be a guy that's going to be pushing for the chains. He's going to be a battering ram type of back, you know, for them to alleviate some of the hits on Ramondre Stevenson. Ramondre does a lot of things well. Zeke, he's not the best blocker, even though he has the size.
Yeah.
He's not the most elusive guy, even though he is relatively quick for his size. And that's where the both of them together is going to work huge for this offense. They're going to be able to utilize both of them in different situations. That's going to work better for this offense. And also, I got to mention Pierre Strong Jr. in this backfield. His second year coming in this season. Look for him to kind of get a little bit more familiar with getting on the football field and becoming part of this rotation as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So I agree with you there, too. Again, we've seen running backs thrive in this offense, too, where it's not even featured on one particular guy. So I think Zeke adding him to this mix, it's another one of those things to where he was sitting out there in free agency and looking for that right type of spot. Where will he succeed? And the Patriots find a way of finding these veterans that have been there and even had trouble in the past with some of these other teams and stuff and just in their personal life, and come here and make a change into their career and actually extend their career longer and make a good run. So I think it'll be great for this offense that keep it balanced and keep it honest here at the running back situation.
It's either that or they're just giving him a last-ditch shot to do something because
I think he's going to do well.
I think he's going to be okay. I mean, honestly, like even when you look at Dallas, he wasn't able to even sustain being on the football field most of the time. So yeah, he is a little bit slower. He gained a little bit of weight and he shredded it off. In preparation for last season, coming into this year. Let's see what he can do with New England. Maybe he's going to be able to show that he's not washed up yet. That he can contribute. Other than that, look at the rest of the offense. And this is kind of where people, I think, kind of point their finger at and say, oh, well, they're still the Patriots. But after you go from the starters in the receiving corps, then it's kind of like a lot of rookies. A lot of rookies. They stacked up on draft picks. They really attacked that position, but with a lot of guys that are really going to be fighting for position in this rotation. Kendrick Bourne still there as a Patriot. But then you go look at all these rookies, and it's like nobody really stands out just yet. There are some guys that have potential, obviously, but that's going to be something to monitor into this last week. Who's going to make the cut? Who's going to earn the backup rotation spots and what have you? But overall, what do we know about the Patriots? What are they really good at? They're really good at always having a solid offensive line. Whether they're missing somebody, they manage to either in the draft or free agency replace them. Riley Reif comes over to kind of lock down that right tackle spot. And other than that, you look at their defense, that's where their bread and butter is.
Yeah.
It's always been, they've always had a really good defense, obviously because Belichick is the mastermind of defense and a leader as well. But something that was interesting this year in the draft, what they were able to do is a guy by the name of Christian Gonzalez slid in this draft, and that we've seen the Patriots do this before, where not everybody was in love with him, but the Patriots were like, if he falls to us, it might be too good to be true to pass up. And they get themselves a starting caliber corner as a rookie to come right in. So other than that, you still see some familiar faces. But Matt Judon coming over from the Ravens and going to be that pass rushing specialist for them, along with some of these other younger players that they have in Josh Uche and Mac Wilson Sr., Juwan Bentley. So they got some nice pieces already. They got some younger guys that are going to come in and work. And then you look at their defense. Jonathan Jones is back. He re-signs. Jack Jones, Adrian Phillips, Kyle Duggar. All these guys coming back again, working together once again, along with the rookie and Christian Gonzalez. If they can get some chemistry going, this defense is yet again going to be one of the better ones in the league.
Yeah, and one thing I would like to see is Dietrich Wise step up again here, because it has to be that starting DN now. Last season didn't really do as well as when he was further down in the depth chart, being that like under the radar type of player, but Lawrence Guy, too, was really a big part of his defense, too, on the other side next to Matthew Judon. But one of the additions that they got in the draft here is Marte Mapu. And what I've found in training camps is these players love this guy and how versatile he is, and being able not just be that linebacker spot, but they can also play him in safety as well. So watch to see what Bill Belichick does, the ultimate schemer, and see if they move him around in this defense around with some of these plays here to confuse these quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the idea is for Belichick to try to find a way to utilize him in the best space available. Not a very solid prospect coming out. Maybe Belichick can improve his play. But other than that, you saw what else they've done is grab projects like, Marte. But Keon White is another one, a guy that was extremely athletically gifted, physical prowess, guy that looks like a monster, has quick twitch fibers and has explosion and speed, but doesn't have the technique that hasn't refined that part of his game. And now that he's with Belichick and with this defense, he's going to be able to maybe develop and could be a problem going down the road.
All right, Mike Tackett has a question
What
again. Here we go. I love these scenarios. Here he goes. Who gets moved first? Everybody too watching too out there. I know we got some people viewing. Answer these questions out there too. They're not just for us. What do you guys think? Let's hear your opinions out there. But he says,
right.
Who gets moved first? Trey Lance, Marcus Mariota, or Jonathan Taylor? Lance is now QB3. Philly is trying to get out of the $5 million that they paid Mariota, and Taylor has been given the okay to seek a trade.
So if you're talking who gets moved first, so versus like a trade,
Versus
Marcus Mariota, I think at the very least is going to get cut, if anything, or he might just remain on the team and they're going to pay the $5 million. $5 million is nothing for a backup quarterback.
Yeah.
Trey Lance, I could see be getting moved first because it's a little bit easier. When you talk about Jonathan Taylor, they're seeking a first round pick. I don't think they're going to get a first round pick from anybody at this stage for a running back. Because we know that running backs are a little undervalued, but at the same time, when you're talking about Jonathan Taylor, who's one of the best backs in the league, that kind of raises eyebrows to where you're saying, well, we want a first-round pick, but you have to have a buyer to go with that. And I don't know, because of the value of draft picks now, if any team is going to be willing to part with a first-rounder for potential down the road than just to grab Jonathan Taylor right now. And you could have the worst offensive line, and Jonathan Taylor is going to be worth nothing to you because you don't have anybody to block from. So I don't know if a team is, unless you're a winning team already, like let's just say maybe the Eagles or someone like that, if they wanted to give up a first rounder, a team that is willing, or a team that is a winning team right now that doesn't need a lot, doesn't have a lot of needs, you can be able to afford to give up that first rounder. But that's the only scenario I could see. But a lot of teams now, they're kind of comfortable with the way their rosters are. So I feel like Taylor's trade is going to take a longer amount of time to get worked out, and that's if it even happens. Trey Lance, on the other hand, I feel is going to be easier to kind of negotiate a trade. You're not going to have to require such a high asking price, and you're getting a young player that you could still develop for your offense.
Right, and if you look at the scenarios, they're all different. Marcus Mariota, he's that veteran that's just signing with this team to be that veteran presence behind Jalen Hurts, who is
he struggled,
clear starter. And yes, he has struggled even as a starter here when he was with Atlanta here. But similar type of attributes. I think he could run that Philly offense fairly well if he was asked upon to be a fill-in starter. If Jalen Hurts happens to get injured, Jonathan Taylor, I agree with you on the same thing. Just the whole thing about trying to get what they're asking for, I don't think is really going to happen. He's going to be disgruntled and stuff, but we're going to probably see these things iron out at least for this season. And then we'll see a different offseason next year. And Trey Lance, the thing is, too, they're losing value on any kind of trade that they potentially could get. But once you name Sam Darnold as your clear number 2, that sends messages everywhere. And the fact that you have a young Brock Purdy there and Trey Lance is still fairly young, you're obviously not going to get what you put into drafting, Trey Lance of what you got there, but you can at least get something, and there's no sense of having him on the roster if he hasn't even made your number 2 right now. So you might as well hand him off, get something while you can, and maybe potentially could be something for somebody else out there.
And that's the whole reason why the story's running rampant, is because Sam Darnold was announced the backup. So of course that, Trey Lance is now being talked about of possibly being traded. We all know that there was a couple teams before the preseason even started that called San Francisco on the availability of said Trey Lance to maybe be traded. So you got to wonder if maybe those couple of teams are going to call back and be like, hey, now that he's available, definitely, let's start talking. Let's see what we can work out. Despite drafting him a 3rd overall in the first round, of course you're not going to get that same kind of value. You're gonna have to have a team that is absolutely in love with them to the point where they're willing to give up maybe a 2nd rounder at most. But I think that's even really pushing it. I think for him being as young as he is and really still unproven, the jury's out, like in terms of trade value. Some people might view him as a 3rd round pick. Some people might view him as like a few, a couple middle round picks worth it, or maybe a 3rd and a late pick. So the spectrum is very wide on that and what could happen, but we'll definitely keep our eyes on that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're talking AFC East and NFC East here, but let's wrap up the AFC East with the New York Jets. I know Franklin's been dying to talk about the Jets here. Here he is, the New York Jets. And again, people are super excited. With Jets fans around here, we are coming out of upstate New York. So they're all about it. They think they got a shot here now, and you would think you do with the MVP type of quarterback here that Aaron Rodgers is, and being able to get this offense and this team together with the defense that they had last year was ranked very high. And
very
despite even things, the offense did fairly well despite some of the turnovers and lack of quarterback play and mistakes that they did. They were still in the hunt for a lot of it. So the fact that if they're able to do some of this stuff, in fact, bringing up the point with I'm sorry, Tom Leiter again, when he was talking about the Bills owning the division, the Bills lost to the Jets during the season, and it was against Zach Wilson, and then they barely beat the Jets again when Mike White was in, and it was just some of the mistakes that Mike White had done. So they play each other tough, one, because they're divisional opponents, but that defense really held Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills in that one game when it was in New York to only like 12 points, I think. It was something very low. So if you got a defense like that, and now you have that all-star Hall of Fame quarterback in Aaron Rodgers with the weapons that are there too as well, plus some more additions, and getting Dalvin Cook here in the backfield on top of what they've had, it could be pretty nice for the Jets moving forward.
You talk about inconsistencies last year. They were changing quarterbacks like they were changing their underwear. They really couldn't figure out what their identity was because they had no leader. They had nobody to kind of take the torch and say, hey, follow me into the cave because we're going, and I feel like Zach Wilson, the Jets still like him. They still want him to grow. They want him to be possibly the future for the Jets. But they felt like they needed to make a drastic change. They needed something because Wilson is definitely not ready to be that starter just yet. He still has the potential, and the Jets see that, and that's why he's still a New York Jet. They bring in his idol in Aaron Rodgers. And by getting that trade done and getting it finalized and getting Aaron Rodgers in here, it all instantly uplifted the locker room. Because now they have a legit direction. Because apparently, like a lot of the players were uncertain at where are we going with this? We know we got a good defense, but we don't have a lead man. Here comes Rodgers. Now there's no question marks. There's no questions at all. They know what they're doing. They're preparing to win now. And by bringing Rodgers in and bringing in, you have some of these talented players. Like obviously Rodgers is going to like chemistry. He's got Alan Lazard that they bring in for that instant chemistry right away. Mecole Hardman is an interesting add, a guy with a lot of speed to kind of beat people over the top. Garrett Wilson, a rookie last year, looked like a damn near veteran. Like the guy was unstoppable. Even with those quarterbacks that they had, he was a problem. Now you put Rodgers with him, it's just going to accelerate his game. And we've seen that already in practice, in preseason games, not with Rodgers, but just him performing alone is tremendous. And then also, Randall Cobb is there, once again, the other former Packer that comes joining, and he's going to be utilized in a rotation for this receiving core only when needed. Right. Because you have the guys ahead of him that can kind of hold the torch here. Other than that, and you look at what was something else. Offensive line. We're worried about the offensive line. They're getting injured. They can't stay healthy. What do? They go and they draft their center that they've needed for quite some time in Joe Tippmann, who I really do think is going to win that job. This kid is something special. He's going to beat out Connor McGovern, which isn't a complete loss because Connor can also play guard if need be. Elijah Vera Tucker come back healthy once again with Mekhi Becton. Those guys have to stay healthy, especially Mekhi Becton, because this dude has not been able to give the Jets a full season since he's been with them. This guy's got to remain healthy to prove himself that he's deserving of a new contract, because that's what's at jeopardy right now for this year with him. Lincoln Tomlinson, Dwayne Brown, another vet to hold it down on the left side. So overall, And then you talk about tight end C.J. Uzama coming back and Tyler Conklin from Minnesota. Good vets. You have veteran presence. You got Breece Hall returning from his injury, who looked the part. And you pair him up, like you mentioned, Dalvin Cook and Michael Carter to, wow. Like this offense, you compare that to last year. If everybody, and I know this could be said about every roster, but if the offensive line can stay healthy, that's going to literally change this team in one offseason, what they're going to be capable of doing. I mean, I'm talking like high scoring points. I'm talking about this team could be very dangerous in this division and could easily contend for that number 1 spot.
Yeah, I mean, and that's obviously the question here. The offensive line, these guys haven't even been together. You know, what is the offensive line? You know, they've had injuries here and there, Mekhi Becton and things, and haven't been able to be together as 5 dudes. And Aaron Rodgers even brought it up, you know, because he tried to ask him what he thought about the offensive line. And he's been the way he always has been. You know, RELAX, relax. You know, I'm just chill. He goes, we haven't even seen these guys together here, all 5 dudes together. Let them and the team figure out who the starters are, and we'll go through the season. And as we go through it all and live it all, if I need to speak up and say some things to the guys, I'm going to say something. And see what happens when we all get together, and everybody knows that when you play together for a length of time, you're only going to get better. And that's the one thing these guys haven't been able to do is be consistent and play together. And that's the big question is keeping Aaron Rodgers. Can he be Aaron Rodgers if he's getting pressured? We saw Aaron Rodgers even last year with injuries on Green Bay's offensive line and struggle, and everybody looks back at it and, you know, Aaron Rodgers sucks now, you know what I mean? All of a sudden, 1 year MVP, now this year, you know, he comes out of, you know, the retreat and stuff, and now he's a different guy, you know, maybe he's not the guy anymore. He needs that offensive line to be there. And like I said, last year, I think they were 29th in offense, you know, together, but still even in games because of their defense. And one thing they want to change too is being passing touchdowns. They were 31st in passing touchdowns. You know, if you have an Aaron Rodgers, I think that's going to change automatically too as well. So if you're in your games and still, you know, finished, they were 7-10 last year, which is even bad, and it's the way some of these other teams were panning out in the NFC and in a tough division. I mean, again, to where it was tight, where 50-50, you know, nobody can land at 500%, you know, somebody needed to make the cut. So they're still in the talks. So Aaron Rodgers adding it to all that with this defense on top of it, I think will only make them better. But just the one thing to watch this season is if that offensive line can keep him protected.
Yeah, you know, and you got to love the defense. Like, they were super solid last year, and they helped keep this team in check, kept them in a lot of games.
Absolutely.
It's just the offense couldn't capitalize in the end in a lot of them. You look at like what I'm excited too is because this defense wasn't even fully healthy. Like, they had a lot of their pieces healthy, but they were missing guys like Jermaine Johnson from a year ago, who hasn't really shown the full spectrum of what he's capable of doing. Still needs to develop a little bit, but man, if he can reach his potential, like, this dude could be an animal as a pass rusher. But that's the thing is you're missing some bits and pieces of this defense, and they also added a little bit more depth too. Like, you know, Adrian Amos, a guy that has been a free agent out there for quite some time, and a guy that's not a bad player at all. Actually, a decent and a really good starter, formerly of the Green Bay Packers. Mm-hmm. That's kind of funny how that ties in. But I mean, I think the world of this defense, and to be honest with you, by improving the offensive side of the ball, by having a legit quarterback, an MVP style quarterback, having everybody back healthy, if you can put points on the board like the Jets are going to do, then that's going to help the defense out, because now the defense is going to be able to stay fresh throughout the games, and they're going to be able to keep attacking and attacking and attacking and never have to let up. That's the dangerous part. Defense is going to get the ball back to Rodgers. Rodgers going to score points. Then the defense does it again and just going to keep cycling. And that's going to lead them to a lot of wins this year.
Yep, absolutely. And like I said, held the Buffalo Bills to only 17 points when they got the victory there. So, I mean, they've done it before. And I think they can only get better under Aaron Rodgers. And also their red zone percentage ranking was 31st too as well. So that is going to change, I think, too, as well for this team. So that's the AFC East. I mean, again, it's going to be a tough division again, I think. It's exciting to see what happens with this whole thing.
It's going to be.
Will it play out? Will the Jets make it here? I don't know. But again, when you look at some of these games, how they played them tough before with like a Joe Flacco and a Zach Wilson and a Mike White. Now you've got Aaron Rodgers. I think anything can happen. We saw what he did even with Green Bay when they were struggling and they didn't have a wide receiver there. He was asking for wide receivers. Give me wide receivers. Right. Yeah. So now he's there. And we'll see.
And now he has what? He has all the receivers.
Mm-hmm.
He has,
including his buddies.
He has a younger offensive line, and hopefully one that doesn't get as injured as much as Green Bay's.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So all right, let's move on to the NFC East here. Let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys, Joe. Here, the Dallas Cowboys, again changing offense.
They're going
now
to the Super
They're
Bowl
going without Kellen Moore, and this is interesting too. I mean, this is different because it's going to be a full reset, and this is what you're seeing in the offseason here and in practice. Everybody's wondering why Dak Prescott is doing so poorly. You know, they think it's just, again, like a flip of a switch too. Like, oh, Dak just stinks. It's this offense. Again, he's asked upon to throw more. I mean, that's what this thing is. Spread it out and go. Their rushing attack, even last year, what they were able to do with a Tony Pollard and a Zeke Elliott and stuff like that, still mix it up and get it going. They're not going to be anywhere near as balanced as they were last year with all that. So throw that out the window. And so then you're going to be asking upon the defense to help bail you out on some of this thing, because I really think that with this offense, they're going to try and push down the field, not going to be able to do it, and they're going to create turnovers and put them in bad field position to where this defense and Dan Quinn has to try and get them out of these troubles.
Here's the thing, too, is because the offense has changed so drastically, don't you think that former offensive coordinator was calling a balanced offense, or at least sometimes maybe even damn near heavy on the run, a little bit heavier on the run for a reason? Because it kind of camouflaged Dak Prescott's, inconsistencies and poor play at times. Because if you ask a player to do too much than what he's comfortable with, it leads to errors. It leads to mistakes. And you saw that last year even. Whenever they needed to throw a lot more, he struggled. He led the league last year, everybody, in the most interceptions thrown as a quarterback. So that right there's got to tell you something. Don't have Dak throw a lot. Dak is a opportunist. So he is a really good quarterback. Just hold on a second. Let me explain. Quarterback when he's not forced to throw the ball. When you utilize the run game and he's able to do play action off of it, and the defense isn't so concentrated on pass protection, that's when you start to see the tight end leak out and be wide open. The slot receiver standing by himself, because now the defense is so worried about the running game, somebody might get open because of the breakdown in coverage. Now, what are they doing now? Now they're throwing a lot more, which is asking Dak Prescott to be a pocket passer, to be something that he is not. He can throw from that plateau. He can do that, but only if there's some deception in the offense. And when you're asking him to just be, hey, we want you to drop back and throw the ball 60 times in the first half, it's not going to work out well, because you need that balance with Dak. You need him to be able to hand the ball off, take some pressure off of him, make the defense think that you're going to run, and then, boom, he comes out on a naked boot and is able to just dump it off to the tight end or throw it to CeeDee Lamb on a post. Those are when Dak thrives, is when he's in a more balanced or even a run-heavy offense. That's when he excels. Now you're asking him to do too much as a quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, and it's showing right now. We all know that McCarthy has been known even with Rodgers, and everyone's going to be like, oh, well, Rodgers was amazing. Yeah, but when you have that luxury of having an MVP quarterback that can just thread the needle everywhere and throw all the time, you get a little spoiled.
Right.
Now you have Dak Prescott. He is not Aaron Rodgers. So you're asking him to do too much.
Yeah, and if you look at it too quick, last year in attempts, they were ranked 6th, and, rushing yards, 9th. So they were there, and on passing, they were 11th. So it's right there. It's balanced. It's right there in the same aspect, and keeping it honest to where their offense overall was ranked 4th, their defense 5th. Again, keeping them in the games. If you look back last time when Mike McCarthy was a head coach and running his offense, the Green Bay Packers offense was 21st, and running was 27th ranked in attempts.
Doesn't run.
Doesn't work. It doesn't go. And they finished 3rd in their division. So they didn't do very well. And Aaron Rodgers, again, his QB rating was a 97. Again, not very well. And so it's a big difference here. And you see that Dak Prescott is kind of struggling to kind of grasp it at this point. And it's going to be a tougher division here because you got to try and compete with a team like the Eagles, who, despite even the air attack that they do have, they can run as well, and not even just their running backs, situation. Even though they lose Miles Sanders, their quarterback can just take off and run too as well. So when you're trying to compete with a team like this with that tough defense too, it's going to be tough. Yeah. I think that Philadelphia is ready to. They're going to be hungry. They're going to be eating.
Yeah. So here's the thing with the Cowboys offense, like we were just talking.
I'm sorry to be all doom and gloom about the Cowboys.
It's by no means an issue with the weapons that he has.
Yes.
You got Michael Gallup, you got CeeDee Lamb, and they added Brandon Cooks, which is going to be a nice deep threat for them. I also would love to see Kevontae Turpin kind of get a little bit on the field a lot more because this guy is so explosive with his speed. If you're able to get the ball in his hands, I feel like he could be a difference maker out there. So weapon-wise, I think they're stout. You know what I mean? They have Luke Shoemaker, who they drafted this year. I feel like he's going to develop into a nice tight end for them. Jake Ferguson looks like he's going to be the starter. Offensive line-wise, we complained about this area a lot with the Cowboys the past 5 years, how they really need to kind of revamp it. They need to start drafting more offensive linemen. They still have yet to do that. Tyron Smith, how long can this guy last? He's been injured the last 2-3 years and hasn't really played a lot of games. Is he going to be able to hold up? That's a big question mark for them. Other than that, the one I will say this, like Zach Martin, they gave him a big deal. They're locking him in, and they have to. Terrence Steele is kind of like a little bit of an unknown offensive lineman who I think is going to go do tremendously well at right tackle. And then after that, obviously you talked about Pollard, touched on him, great player, but how often is he going to get used? Is he going to be used just in the passing game now? And that's going to be a problem. We talked about this, and it's like you need to be able to run a lot more. I wonder if McCarthy, about halfway through the year, is going to have to change his play calling. Because if the Cowboys offense have a problem putting points on the board because he's so pass happy, then he's going to have to. You got to mix it up. You got to let him run a little bit more.
Right. And what happens too? We noticed it. In the last season or so with his offense when he was running with Green Bay too. It became too predictable. Everybody knew kind of when you spread out what they were going to do, and we saw a little bit in when Ben McAdoo would run it with the Giants. It ended up being even predictable at times, too, of what they're doing. He was running the same type of offense of what McCarthy was. He came from that coaching tree. So when you line up again, say it's third down and whatever, people already know what you're doing, and it's usually deeper routes, too. And there's like, all right, we'll just play zone, keep you busy, and send somebody, and then you're going to run out of time because you're not going to have enough time to do it,
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem for Dallas, and that's the biggest concern is offense right now. Like, it's not shortage of talent.
Yeah, it's there.
I feel like it's going to be the play calling, and it's going to hinder Dak and for them to be able to put points on the board. But luckily, they got a halfway decent defense.
Yes,
and they managed to kind of add to that defense, especially in the draft with Mozzie Smith, who was this kind of he was getting a little bit more hype as we got closer to the draft, but a guy who's a star-studded run stopper. And the Cowboys definitely need that. Guy that's going to come in, kind of lock down that middle portion of the D-line to play that D-tackle spot. And for God's sakes, thank God somebody listened to us this year, Jim.
Yeah.
Micah Parsons is now officially going to play off that edge and just keep coming after the quarterback, keep coming in and stopping the run. That's what this guy is for. This guy has been bred for this, to scream off the edge and just create havoc. Let him work.
Yes.
DeMarcus Lawrence, what happened to this guy? What happened to DeMarcus Lawrence? Got paid that big, large sum of money, and now it almost seems like he's kind of disappeared. Isn't playing up to par so far. So hopefully maybe he can get, something going this season. A very familiar face in Leighton Vander Esch returns again and coming back from he was out there in free agency. Nobody signed him, comes back to kind of really duct tape that position because they really don't have an answer after that. They did draft, DeMarvion Overshone to kind of develop him and maybe get him to be up to a starting role. But other than that, you look at after the linebacking position, not very deep.
Yeah.
Bottom line, not very deep. I do like Malik Jefferson, who's a little bit lower on the depth chart, but we'll see if he can even make the roster. Secondary-wise, they got the return of Malik Hooker. He re-signs. Trevon Diggs, of course, is still going to be there. Stephon Gilmore, new addition that they bring over to kind of lock down that one side along to have Diggs on the other side. They have improved on some of the holes that they had. So I expect this defense to be very solid. And by all means, they're going to have a lot of pressure on them to keep this team in games. They're going to have to stop offenses more than the average defense to try to keep the offense, get them more opportunities to hopefully score.
Yeah, absolutely. And Malik Hooker coming off his best season of his career with the Cowboys. Again, like when they brought him in a few years ago, a real resurgence of his career to where it was looking kind of grim there with Indy and then post-COVID and things like that. But he was a bright spot for that defense, when they weren't really expecting it out of a guy like that. I mean, they were just signing him as, like a veteran to keep, somebody back there. When
you have a major injury like he did, it's going to take more than 1 year to come back. And the Colts weren't willing to wait. And that's really where he was his best. He was really his best when he was with the Colts in his prime. Had that catastrophic injury. Teams weren't giving him a shot. And Dallas were like, hey, you know what? We'll sign him to a low 1 year deal. Let's see what he can do for us. And boom, ends up locking it down.
All right. We've got Paul Matty's in the house
with
us
What's
tonight.
going on, Paul?
Matty's in the house with us tonight. From Playa Linda Beach, Florida, that's right. Playa Linda Beach. Still haven't been there. I got to go visit my man Paul Matty. I'm planning a trip soon. We got to go down there. Joe's down there like yearly, multiple times a year, right, Joe?
I love Florida.
Man, I got to go down there. I have family down there I got to visit. But
we're going
to talk about the New York Giants. There we are, Joe, the New York Football Giants. Again, it looked really good last year too in Brian Daboll's offense. What a difference with Daniel Jones too on top of it. Last year, 67%, 15 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions. They were ranked first in interceptions here on offense, so having the least amount. So right there, just with Brian Daboll there and that influence, really changing the mishaps with Daniel Jones and the turnovers. And even he fumbled sometimes when he would take off running, but he was running a lot more. He even amassed 708 yards rushing. So we see a different animal here in Daniel Jones. And looking to extend it this coming year too, and we've already seen some of it in preseason play. The little bit of time that he's played right now, making some moves and plays with his legs. But now we've got an addition of some more wide receivers here. Sterling Shepard's coming back off that injury, looks pretty sharp, for now. But again, we've heard rumors that maybe they are comfortable enough with that wide receiver crew that they might even move him at one point. But where they started off well with Brian Daboll, looking into a second year gearing forward, I think the offense will do just as well and even better now, especially that they've locked Saquon Barkley in. But the real question is that defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, the defensive side of the ball, and that's really going to be the key for this team. We got to say this. Last year, let's go back to last year. No real weapons at all. Like they were picking guys off the street. You know what I mean? When you have guys from like Isaiah Hodgins, nobody knew who this guy was at one point in time, and they were like, "Well, who is this guy? What?" Very big receiver, made a name for himself though because he was given an opportunity and he seized it, held on to that like the football that gets thrown to him. Like he was on point, and he earned himself a starting gig now coming into this year. And you think of the likes of Darius Slayton. I'm not that high on Darius Slayton anymore. I used to be. I used to be a believer in him and thought he could be a real good difference maker for the Giants. But with his inconsistency of catching the football, that's still a problem for me. But one addition that they made is Paris Campbell, which is kind of like under the radar. A guy that really hasn't been a prominent receiver for the Colts. But they're bringing him in here, and they're going to give him a legit shot to become that. Sterling Shepard, guy that's very consistent when he's available. A guy that needs to remain healthy, and that's kind of been his drawback, is that he just hasn't been able to stay healthy for long periods of time, and that might cost him a roster spot, to be honest with you, because he is a veteran receiver at this point, and a guy that could lose his job to the likes of guys like Wan'Dale Robinson, who kind of splashed on the scene last year as well. Jalen Hyatt, a rookie that they drafted, who I think, given time, given some more development with his route running, he can be a deadly force for this team as well. So they have talent. And you also talk about Cole Beasley, former Bill. You know what I mean? He was like awesome for the Bills. And now the Giants bring him in because why not? At the very least, even if he doesn't make the team, even guys like Jamison Crowder, they're giving these guys shots, these vets last-ditch shots. If they earn their way on the team, they got themselves a veteran, savvy receiver that can do, move the chains at the very least or what have you, and work with these younger receivers. So now we're talking about their depth, which they'd never had before.
Right.
And that's a huge thing for guys like, Daniel Jones going forward. If he can kind of keep creating chemistry with these guys like Wan'Dale Robinson, guys like Isaiah Hodgins, and moving forward, then you look at the tight ends. They had Daniel Bellinger last year, got a little nicked up, but a guy that kind of splashed on the scene quietly for the Giants, was able to convert on some first downs, caught some touchdown passes, and you started to see something click there between Daniel Jones and him. They also bring in Darren Waller. Darren Waller has been seen as one of the top 3, top 5 tight ends in this league, and they add a big-time weapon with speed at that position. You look at this offense now, with Barkley coming back for another year, now that they have something going, they've managed to Band-Aid the offensive line a little bit, and one of my favorite draft picks for them is actually John Michael Schmitz, who was rated one of the best centers, if not the best center, coming out. That's something that they definitely needed to grab, is at least one solid offensive lineman. They get that with their quarterback of the offensive line and John Michael Schmitz. I think they've done a great job this offseason. Draft, free agency. They've done as much as they possibly could to get ready for this upcoming season offensively. Let's see if it leads to points on the board now.
Right, absolutely. And that's what we were looking at. Because, again, they made it to the divisional round, but once they got to another team that's really that competitive team to beat in the NFC, and the Eagles, they got demolished. They just weren't ready. But it was a nice story. They were doing well despite, again, they were like that blue-collar team where, like you said, wide receiver by committee and making it through and pulling out a victory against the Minnesota Vikings to move on further. But when it came down to it, just not able to put it up enough offense just because they didn't have the weaponry. And that defense, I like the fact that Wink Martindale likes to blitz a lot and get some things done, but it did leave you exposed. They did have issues here in the backfield. And what do? They go out and draft some guys. And one thing that has been the nice story with this team, too, is the fact that they get a guy in the 6th round, and that's Trey Hawkins III, and he has really performed so much so that he takes a starting spot here on one side, and then Deonte Banks, their number 1 pick in this year's draft, here on the opposite side. Hey, and we'd say, then we still got Adoree Jackson there. You're going to take a backseat and just go into a nickel position? I really like the situation there now for him, too, because now if anybody's coming over in that slot spot, you got an Adoree Jackson who at times last year you saw really, he was like up and down, did make some really good plays, but then sometimes made some mistakes. You're kind of like, out of a veteran, you don't really see that happen so much, and it happens sometimes with Adoree. So here at the slot spot, I think I like that a lot better, especially if you go with like a single high safety and bring another guy in the box like an Xavier McKinney or whatnot. I really like the coverage situations here with these corners now and what they've got here on the backfield in case they do try and bring the house.
And where Adoree Jackson has struggled is always zone coverage. That's always been his knock on him. He's been a great man-to-man coverage guy. When you ask him just to say, don't think about it, just cover that guy. He can do that. He can cover anybody like that. But you look back in Tennessee where he formerly was, they played a lot of zone coverage. That's where he struggled, and that's where he became free. So for the Giants to get him, I feel like as long as you don't ask him to do too much in zone, I feel like he's going to lock it down for you. So Adoree Jackson, I don't know where he's going to end up. It looks like he'll be the nickel, but it's tough to say because with a rookie and Trey Hawkins, he's been a spotlight for them thus far, but we haven't even gotten to the regular season yet, so where he's really going to be tested. You might even see Adoree Jackson kind of still win that out and be able to be that corner. But you got to love the future for their cornerbacks. You know, Trey Hawkins looks like he's coming into his own. Deonte Banks, he's a top 5 corner coming out. Some people arguably top 3. But the Giants could not pass that up when he was available for them in the first round. They had to make that decision there. Going forward with this secondary, you're seeing much like their offense where they made key additions. Yes, they're rookies in both of these corners, but they're both rookies that can not only come in and start, but they could make some impact. You know, they are definitely well worth seeing what they're able to do this season. I will say this too: when you look at their defensive line, how solid they are. You know, Ashawn Robinson they brought over from the Rams to kind of lock down that D tackle spot. Dexter Lawrence, great player. There once again, Leonard Williams. Hopefully this guy can stay healthy. He got a little nicked up last year, missed a little bit of time, but still a dominant player. And then Kayvon Thibodeau. Kayvon Thibodeau was a rookie last year. Yeah. He still showed splashes of what he's capable of doing, but not at his full capacity. This year, coming into his second year, he's learned a lot more. He's learned how to, protect his body from injury. He's learned how to eat right, learn different tips and tricks from guys like Leonard Williams. He's going to implement all that this season. He's going to show you that he's even a better player than you thought he was.
Yeah, for me, he was underwhelming. Again, I think he wasn't able to shed some of the blocks here. I'm looking to see some more of that this season.
You got to remember with rookies at any position, a lot of times, almost all the time, they're not going to come in and be the showstopper you expect them to be. Kayvon Thibodeau, very talented pass rusher, was number 1, in terms of his position. But even though the Giants did end up acquiring him, he still needed to refine parts of his game that it's going to happen for him. You saw enough last year where you're like, wow, the explosion, or wow, the change of direction, the tackling and all that. So it's going to show up even more this year. I'm telling you right now. So I like what the Giants have been able to do. And we know that they're going to be called, aggressively. They're going to come after people. They're not waiting and letting you throw the football and get comfortable back there. I'm telling you right now, they're going to send the house at times. Don Martindale is known for not being passive. He's known for being aggressive. He likes to send different blitz concepts and throw different angles at quarterbacks to kind of confuse them. I think he's going to continue to do that. And this Giants team, look at what they were able to accomplish last year. Forwarded that to this year with all the additions that they've made and improvements. And this Giants team is another contending team in this division.
Well, I think even just in the playoff hunt, again, division, you don't know. Let's see what happens when they play against a team like the Eagles, because the Eagles are dominant in this division. And when they faced them, they just got demolished. So I'm looking to see how they play them, and if they can contend with them, then something different has happened with this team, and it can actually contend with the team.
I don't think they're ready for that yet.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They're not ready for that. I'm looking to see something better than what last year, because last year they weren't even in the same house. So, and speaking of that team, let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles here, who made it to the Super Bowl again, and what a high for that team. They were pushing through a whole season, just dominating,
destroying
a lot
everybody.
Of teams, just
destroying everybody,
and the talent that they had, and they only get better even this year. Like I said, they lose a Miles Sanders, but they're able to get even more, on the offensive situations here in the running back position. So they swap one guy out for another guy. And yes, they don't have, Shane Steichen there anymore, running that offense, but I don't think they're going to lose a step because they have all the same players there still and the same guys working together, so they're just going to push forward and make another run at this. And who knows, right now, I think they still have to be the team to beat in the NFC at this point.
100%, because when you look at the roster, they are so solid. And we talk about the Bills and how deep they were. Now we're at the Eagles. This is another team that is tremendously deep with talent at every position. I'm sorry, but like there is a receiver that they added from the Atlanta Falcons, and Olamide Zaccheaus, who's a little under the radar. If you're not a Falcons fan or something, you might not even have heard his name before. But this is a guy that I feel like can come in and be the third receiver in this rotation to really kind of make an impact and surprise a lot of people that haven't followed his career thus far. A.J. Brown, what can you say about the guy? The guy is electric. Their offensive line, this is something interesting, is that despite the losses that they've had, guys, Andre Dillard left, and he's now a Tennessee Titan, they've able to replace these guys very quietly or almost not even known. You know what I mean? Like guys like Cam Jurgens, who's definitely a lockdown guard for them. Lane Johnson. This is another guy where he has a tendency to get beat up, miss some time, come back, get beat up, miss some time. Nothing catastrophic, but he is getting older. So maybe the Eagles this upcoming offseason maybe look to kind of find his replacement there. But when you look at their offensive line, how solid it is, Landon Dickerson, they got him in the draft in 21, locking it down at guard. I love what they've been able to do thus far. You mentioned the running backs and how Miles Sanders is no longer there, but I think they actually improved their running back position by getting DeAndre Swift from the Lions, who was very underutilized in Detroit for some ungodly unknown reason. Like, it was almost like the coaching staff had it out for DeAndre and didn't want him to play very much. Very weird situation there. But you pair him up with Kenneth Gainwell and Rashad Penny coming from Seattle. So there's a lot to like there. And then defensively, like this team is just crazy with talent on that side of the ball. You have guys that are returning. You got Brandon Graham coming back for another year. You have guys like Jordan Davis coming into his second year from last season, going to be that starter now because Hargrave is not there anymore. So now it's time to step up, Jordan. Hopefully you worked on your conditioning so you can last long. And then in the draft, they end up adding, this is crazy, the number 1 D tackle coming out in this draft. And a lot of people had him, going anywhere from like first overall pick to, in the top 5 somewhere. Like this guy was a legit player. Only slid because of some, past experiences. But the Eagles managed to, they're willing to roll the dice on this kid. If he can stay on the straight and narrow, can stay out of trouble, this dude's going to be a freaking machine. Jalen Carter, you put him next to Jordan Davis. These are 2 stout, monstrous type of D tackles. You put him now with Fletcher Cox on top of it all. Good God, this rotation's going to be dangerous. Now you got Josh Sweat returning. There's a lot to love about this team. I mean, and it just goes on. Then you look at some of the other draft picks that they got. Kaylee Ringo in the 4th round. Nolan Smith, one of the hybrid, if you will, players coming out of college where you could pretty much play this guy anywhere. Linebacker, D-end. You can move him around like a chess piece. Very gifted player. That guy I'm really excited about to see what they do with him. And other players in that linebacking core, Zach Cunningham comes over for more depth. I mean, Nicholas Moreau, formerly a Bear, got hurt last year, comes back. Great coverage linebacker. Nakobe Dean, Darius Slay, and James Bradbury once again come back. I mean, the list goes on and on. But what I'm saying is good luck against the Eagles because they have so much weaponry. They have so much depth at every position that they are going to be very hard to beat.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only question that was asked of him last year is like, what was Jalen Hurts going to look like again? And 66%,
he's going to look like he did last
22
year.
touchdowns, only 6 INTs. Again, 760 yards rushing himself too. Looking like an all-star. And he answered to us, shut up a lot of people that were hating on him.
A lot of the naysayers, yeah.
Absolutely. So moving forward, we only see them to do well as well and be that number 1 seed. Next we got, and finally, the Washington Commanders. Joe, again, team that's just kind of just relearning everything here and getting started here. But
they're hitting the
I'm
reboot.
just wondering now how much of a reboot we're going to do with this whole thing, because we do have the Josh Harris group now that is the ownership. And with that, we know changes do happen. You know what I mean?
Right.
And again, Ron Rivera wasn't his guy, but he goes out and they go get, beforehand, there he went and got an Eric Bieniemy, but I think Josh Harris might like that whole aspect again. And I think that if it is another losing season for this team, despite, yes, they haven't had their quarterback, in the last couple of years too, and figured out who was going to be that guy. They've been struggling. That I think Ron Rivera is going to be out, and then Eric Bieniemy just move right into that spot naturally. And I'm intrigued to see what they're going to get out of this offense, because you and I even talked about it off air before we got started. But Bieniemy, this is going to be the true test. You step out of Andy Reid's shadow and see how much of a real offensive mind or coordinator that you are with a Sam Howell and things like that. Not the Patrick Mahomes and even the Alex Smiths of the world that you might have had before. See what you do with this team now, who's not expected to do a whole lot. Yes, they have a ton of weapons, which is good, and that falls into play with an Bieniemy offense with what they have. But with Sam Howell, running the show, what are you going to get out of this offense? So I'm intrigued to see that.
See, Sam Howell was a runner in college. So I feel like there's going to be similarities that he's going to be able to utilize, just like Mahomes. Like, I'm sorry, but he's deceptively fast, Sam Howell. He can move if he has to. And he is a halfway decent passer. He wasn't my cup of tea coming out of college from North Carolina. I didn't really like his full spectrum of arm throwing. I didn't think he could make every single throw. But we're going to see with this team. Now, when you look at Kansas City's offense, what do they do very well? They run the ball very well. They get the ball to their tight ends very well. They are very creative in receiver screens, in jet sweeps, in trick plays. So you hope that you can see some of that integrated into this Commanders offense. And I feel like you're going to expect to see that, but what might limit them in doing some of those plays is their offensive line. Their offensive line is very different from a year ago. They've managed to grab some free agents from different, spots, one being a former Chief and Andrew Wiley. Hopefully he can stay healthy to lock down that right tackle spot. But then you got guys like Nick Gates from the Giants. You got guys like Sam Cosmi. So there's a lot more changes up front at the offensive line, which has got to be a little concerning because these guys haven't played together yet, full time and what have you, and got any chemistry. So that's going to be the interesting part in protection wise. But like you said, offensive weapon wise, tons of it. Byron Pringle, who's had some time with the Chiefs, so there's some familiarity there. Had a small stint with the Bears, but this is a guy very quick. You like to see what he could do in a more opened up offense. And maybe, just maybe, we might see a Logan Thomas sighting for once, because in the Chiefs offense, they utilize that tight end a lot. So let's see if he can become more of an impact player like he once was before his injury. Brian Robinson coming back, fully healthy. Let's see what he can do with a full year, of productivity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, offensively, I feel like it's going to be a little bit of a bumpy road for them because of the lack of protection that might happen. But by no means is it going to be because they don't have enough weapons.
Right, yeah, and that's the thing, and what we've learned too from camp so far is Jahan Dotson is a favorite of Sam Howell. So if he likes going to him too, if somebody's even on a Terry McLaurin, and then they switch over to even try and take on Dotson, you've got McLaurin there, and then Curtis Samuel in the slot. I mean, that's a perfect situation for you. I mean, I really like the features and the way that happens. And like you said, even Byron Pringle, familiar with the offense, and I'm sure they're going to sprinkle him in every now and then too as well, and fully capable of doing a lot of those trick plays that Bieniemy and Andy Reid were very well known for.
Right.
One question, even though the defense has been really stellar, even that's been the best part of this, I guess, this team so far, I guess. Chase Young needs to stay healthy. That's the key for them, I think, even for this guy. The defensive rookie of the year, first year out, and injury prone since.
Yeah.
So
he's had a ton of
this
injuries.
guy stay on the field and see if he could be that player that he once was.
I mean, that's what everybody wants in Washington is for him to stay healthy. But guess what? Just because you want it to happen doesn't mean it will.
Will it to happen?
Here's the thing with Chase Young. Because of all his injuries that have stacked up, he's had 1 year of real success. Mm-hmm. That's where we're at with Chase Young with Washington is they're not really sure on him. Because if he gets injured yet again, it doesn't even have to be like season ending. Mm-hmm. It could just be maybe he misses 3 weeks. I think that alone, if he gets injured at all, is going to make the decision for Washington to not re-sign him, to not keep him long term, to move on from him, whether that be trading him before week 8 or they just kind of let him walk off into the sunset into free agency but at the end of the year. So this is going to be a critical season for Chase Young to try to prove himself that he's not an injury-riddled player, that he can stay healthy, and on top of that, to try to earn a long-term contract and stay with the team that drafted him. But besides him, you look at the D-line, and if Young can stay healthy, that D-line alone is very scary with Deron Payne, with Montez Sweat, with Jonathan Allen. Like, these guys are all animals. And if that part of the ball can stay healthy there up front, they're going to create a lot of havoc in the backfields of opponents. They're going to need it because behind them, you look at linebackers, and besides Jamin Davis and Cody Barton, who they brought over from Seattle, there's not a whole lot of depth. There's not a whole lot of, like, guys that can come in and start right away for you and you don't miss a beat. So depth-wise at the linebacking position kind of concerns me for Washington. And then secondary, their rookie in Emmanuel Forbes. I'm a huge fan of him coming out. The only problem that he might have is his stature. Very tall, lanky type corner, but very thin. Very, very thin. Sub 180. Like, I think he weighed coming out of college like 160, 170-ish, and that's very thin for a guy. So I wonder if he could even jam if he's asked to against some of these physical receivers. Another one is nickelback / safety, Jartavius Martin, who coming out of Illinois, one of the most stout DBs in college. So they got themselves a gem, I feel like, for the secondary there. But other than that, you look at Kendall Fuller, still a vet, still going to hold it down on the one side. At safety, this is kind of where I'm a little like, I don't know what to expect. Are they going to get beat in the safety department because nobody screams danger in that position to me? No one scares me. So I think they still got some holes on the back end that they got to work on going forward. Maybe they look to free agency before week 1 hits. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're just say, hey, we're comfortable with our D-line getting pressure, and we're going to work with what we got. So it's going to be interesting to see what Washington does this year, mainly offensively. But defensively, they should still be good to go. It's just they might suffer a little bit on the back end.
Yep, absolutely. So there you go. That's the NFC and AFC East reviews. We're excited again. The season's going to get started. Football.
It's getting close. It's getting close, everybody.
Absolutely.
Getting close.
So next week we've got the what is it? The West now. Finally
going west.
Rounding up with the West
on the West Coast.
And everything. The wild, wild West, and preseason will be all over, and we're going to see our cuts. And
I'll tell you right now, I'm more than anything, I'm excited to see who gets cut from each team because we see it every year. There's a surprise veteran cut, or there's just a surprise cut in general where you might be a fan favorite player of yours, and he ends up going. Then you wonder where these guys are going to end up signing after the cuts are made. So right before week 1, very exciting, very interesting. Help us out if you could, guys. Please do us a huge favor. Head over to YouTube. Hit that subscribe button for our channel. Hit that notification bell, let you guys know when we go live. And also follow us on anywhere you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, you name it. Drop the follow there as well. And, of course, you can follow us on Facebook as well. Be great. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for being know-it-alls out there. Really appreciate you guys. Thanks to our sponsors. Thanks to everybody. Let's keep this train rolling.
All right. See you guys next time.
Join us next week from 8 till 10 Wednesday night for more Football on the Know with Jim and Joe.